they were all marching with us. It was a disaster. Last year we got it right. We actually closed Sheridan Road, which I'm sure endeared us with the town of Evanston. Anyway, so we actually had them there. We did, it was really beautiful. The parents did their thing, and it was gorgeous. So that was another one we learned, and it got better and better. Other traditions we have, obviously the football game is great. We're undefeated. A lot of schools aren't. I'm going to mention them. No. Only 3 Big Ten teams still undefeated. Of course, we're one of them. So I hope that your sons and daughters will go to the game. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then that night we have Six Flags. Everybody knows Six Flags? The great roller coasters, one about 40 minutes away from there. And that was another, probably your idea also, Virgie. Is that my idea? Is it a good idea? It's a good idea. That's my idea. Yeah, it was my idea. Now I just remembered. It's a good idea. And what happens is the park is closed on Saturday night. So what we do is we just take it over. 2,000 strong. Last year we had 56 buses, and this year we'll have similar number of students. Again, probably 2,200. I always had this fantasy, when I was growing up, and I'd go to Disneyland with just my friends. And it would be free, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So the park is closed. It's only open to Northwestern students. They get back to campus around 1:30 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and that's been going well. We've done that a couple of years. And now for the second year, we have mandatory community service. Patricia alluded to the fact that at Northwestern, we try to imbue in our students this idea that, with the privilege of attending a great institution like ours, comes attendant responsibility. So there's a mandatory community service, and this is the second year we'll be doing that. So we're doing a lot of traditions. Sometimes for those of us, who are older, you think that a tradition is long-standing, right? But you have to remember that for your sons and daughters, most of them are 18, for them, they have no sense of history. I guess that's bad, but it's also kind of good because you can start these new traditions. And in fact, I was a judge at a talent show 2 years ago at Bob, the dorm that, anybody have their kids at Bob? Ooh, good luck. It's actually the happiest students, they love it. We actually put a lot of money into it. And anyway, so it's actually, but it's quite a dorm. So let me move on from there. Anyway, so I was judging this talent contest at Bob, and they were doing really bad. But anyway, I was pretending I was enjoying it and everything. And at the end, I couldn't pick anybody because none of them, showed any real talent. But so at the end, I said, I'm going to question them. So I asked one of them, who was a freshman, and I said, tell me your favorite thing. This was the end of this guy's freshman year, 2 years ago. So I said, what's your favorite thing so far about Northwestern? He said, well, President Shapiro, my favorite thing is, March Through the Arts. It was really meaningful for me to be part of such a long-standing tradition. Well, that was the first year we did it, so I didn't have a heart in it to say, well, anyways, I just said, yeah, it's a great tradition that you started. So anyway, I always joke, you can always tell a college or university town because when you walk around, not only on every block is there, a sushi restaurant and a coffee shop or something, but many of them in the windows say, established 2005. Like for us, 2005, you think it's a joke, but for these kids, they were in elementary school, for them it's like the Civil War or something, right? So they have no idea. So we can create these new traditions, and even if at Northwestern we don't nail them the first time, we just keep doing them, Patricia, until we get them right. So I'm excited about that. So this is a talk that most presidents call the helicopter talk. This is a phrase, it's a term that was coined by a friend of mine, I think in 1999, an op-ed she wrote for the New York Times. And, the idea about a helicopter parent is that they hover over their kids for 4 years and you never give them any space. And as Patricia said, you want your kid to be ready to go into the real world, and you want them to gain responsibility. And even though, people in my generation never had that worry with their parents, I played Little League for years. They didn't even know I was playing Little League. It wasn't like I had to do those little orange slices and sit in those stupid chairs and scream at them the whole time. Screaming encouragement, of course. So it was a different generation. So, the idea is that sometimes people have trouble letting go. And when you get presidents together, the first story, we love to tell the stories about the craziest parent. And you don't want to be one of them. But, the stories are just absolutely unbelievable. You think that you're making them up, but they're really true. And it's not just parents going, when your son or daughter is going to meet with an advisor and sitting in on it and saying, not letting the kid talk. which happens regularly. And it says, well, what are you interested in? They said, well, we already worked out the schedule. And the kid said, well, you shut up. That happens. We have going to meals for like a month. We have some showing up for classes. We have some parents literally every year who try to sleep in the common rooms there outside the doors. I mean, it's seriously crazy stuff. So, presidents tell those stories, and they are a little worrying. I mean, not a little worrying, they're very worrying. And, we can all tell those stories. I'll tell one quick one, true story that happened to me about 6, 7, 8 years ago when I was president of my former job at Williams. And I got a call on a Monday morning. Monday morning is the worst, right? Because you always get the angry everything going on from whatever happened in the crazy weekend. So I'm sitting at my desk, and it was probably, 8:30, 9 in the morning, and, my assistant comes in. They said there's this mother on the phone, mother of a junior. It was like in May, so it was April. So it was the end of this kid's junior year. I actually knew the kid because he was an econ major, even though he hadn't been my student. I knew him pretty well. He was a great kid. So, my assistant says, his mom's on the phone, and she's really adamant. She really has to talk to you because she's very upset. Her son had a fight with his roommate over the weekend, so she just thought she'd better call the president and see what the president's going to do about it. So, what are you going to do? So I took the call, of course, and the mother gets on, and she opens up with this great line, and she said, boy, if my son knew I was calling the president about this, he would kill me. And the temptation, of course, is saying, well, maybe he has a point. But you can't say that, because again, remember what I told you, it could be first cousin to the board chair, and you're fighting, So you just say, okay, well, what happened? And she goes on telling me this story that, I'm sure it was important to her. And obviously the son called on Sunday night and said, Mom, I had this big fight with my roommate over the weekend. I don't know how we're going to go forward about this. And, this is a real problem. And then, she decides, of course, that I should figure out what to do about this. So I said to her, well, okay, I happen to know your son. He's a great kid and everything. And, did your son, he slept on it. Did you talk to him this morning and maybe things calmed down? Because I know these guys are friends. The roommate was my student. And they were friends. I always saw them together. So maybe they worked it out. Because no, I didn't call him again. I didn't want to bother him. I just bothered you. I don't need a stinking president anyway. So, and I said, well, did you encourage your son to go to the dean of students or somebody in the office and maybe even try to get a new roommate, which you could do very easily if you don't get along with your roommate? No, I didn't want to bother them. I didn't want to bother anybody but me, right? So, and I just said to her, well, I don't know, maybe your son, who by the time was 21, could really take this into his own hands and try to, that's part of the education process. She'd have none of that. She was like, no, it's your fault. You're the president. You got to go out there and mediate this thing. Knock on her door and go over something. So I tried a different tack. I said the following. I said, okay, I know he's an econ major, son. So because let's just think about the future for this kid. Because a little bit more than a year, he was going to graduate and enter the big world out there. And I said, what do you hope your son's going to do? And he said, well, my husband's at Wall Street, and my son's about to do an internship at Goldman Sachs, and he's an independent guy, and we're really hoping that he does well. This is the rising senior, and he get a job at Goldman, and that would be a great life and stuff. And I said, well, here's my worry. Because I've had a lot of students over my 34 years of teaching economics and math that, who go work on Wall Street. And, a lot of people say they work 70 hours, 80 hours a week. If you're an analyst at Goldman, they don't just pay you that money for nothing. They work you really hard. And my worry, I said, ma'am, is the following, is that he's going to call you on a Sunday night, right? And he'd say, Mom, I didn't even sleep. I took a nap there in the office, and I just been working to the bone. It's just really crazy, and I don't know what to do. And you're going to call Goldman the next morning, okay? And you're going to somehow get some assistant. At the time, it was Hank Paulson was the president at Goldman. You're going to insist, because you're adamant, to talk to President Paulson, at Goldman. And Hank's going to get on the phone, and you're going to say, okay, Hank, my son had a really bad weekend. He worked too hard, and I know that he doesn't want to complain. I know he'd kill me if he knew I was calling you, but you got to do something about this. And then Hank probably would say, I am. He's fired. So I told this story, and you'd think that this woman would step back and say, oh, I get your point. But she was like, oh, okay. So what are you going to do? She completely as if I hadn't said it. Anyway, but the point to think about is, as Patricia said, you got to know when to let go. I mean, you have to realize that you just can't baby these kids anymore. And it's tough for my generation to let our kids go. It really is. I think it was very easy for at least my parents and many of our parents, but it's a different generation. What actually bothers me about the helicopter talk, which is really, if you're not out by tomorrow or 2, you'll get arrested, send your tuition. I sat through, my wife and I, our kids are 25, 24, and 12 now. So we dropped off years ago our 25, now 25, and our 24-year-old. And we sat in audiences like this, and we heard the helicopter talk. And I really didn't like it. I didn't like it for 2 reasons. One, it was very unrealistic to expect that parents who invest so much in kids are just going to turn it off. The idea that somehow your kids would have gotten into Northwestern if you didn't ask them how they were doing in their grades, if you didn't encourage them to do extracurriculars, if you didn't get involved as advocates for them in their schools, their elementary, middle schools, and high schools. This idea somehow that, we're crazy and we're too involved with our kids and we're living through our kids. I don't know about you, I really resent that. So the whole premise that somehow, I'm not mature enough to let my kids go, and to hear from parents, so I'm sitting there, I'm just shaking my head going, how dare they say that? So the first thing, and even if it's really true to a certain extent, it's unrealistic. Particularly the people who don't realize that they should let go are not going to be convinced in a 15-minute talk to let go. So this idea to blame the parents, I think it's more, frankly, just to set them up so that when they start complaining about something wrong at the university, we say, we told you so, don't complain. But the reality is, sometimes we mess up, sometimes you should complain. And the reality is, it's entirely unrealistic for you to, just come back in 4 years. And it's not only unrealistic, it's unproductive. Because Patricia was saying that we need help. Now, at Northwestern, for a big research university with all our luster and sponsored research, I think we care deeply about undergraduate education. I do, you do, but we all do, but the vast majority of the faculty at Northwestern. But it's not to say that we want you to go away. We want your help, and we want you to do things probably not like hound your kids the way I hounded my 2 older kids and hound my younger one now, about the grades. How'd you do? Did you get the test back? Most of your sons and daughters really don't need that. They did get into Northwestern, so they'll probably going to be fine with that. You probably don't have to hound them with that, but you do have to encourage them to make good decisions. And Patricia mentioned some, there's a lot of freedom in these dorms on the weekend, and even though we try to be as involved as possible, they're going to be making decisions about sex and about alcohol that, some of them are ill-prepared to make. I think most people in my generation, I know when I got to college, I was tired of throwing up, and I was really done with that. That was so high school, right? But the reality is, many of these kids now are so sheltered that, they really need your support, and they need your advice, and talk to them honest. And I can tell you, I've been in this business for a long time. People make really bad decisions under the influence of alcohol. And I'll tell you, we need you to be partners. We have programs, and they're over there before classes start on Thursday. They're going to be hearing a lot of lectures and stuff about looking after each other. But I'll tell you, some of them are going to make mistakes. And I've seen mistakes that haunt people for the rest of their lives. So, talk to them. Don't just wash your hands and say, oh, it's Mort's problem, it's Patricia's problem. Talk to them about, what's the drinking culture like? Are you part of it? Can you do other things? And are you making really good decisions in your life? Because they get tremendous amounts of freedom. And again, this generation is much less prepared to deal with the kind of freedom you find in the dorms on a Friday and Saturday, Sunday night than our generation had. So that's one thing we want you to do. The other thing is that, we have very diverse campuses, right? It's diverse by internationality, the nationality, the international status, and by race, and by ethnicity, socioeconomics, political, and on and on and on. And if your son or daughter really finds a group that reminds him or her of high school,